brother, because ain't nothing make me so happy is to run you completely out of Georgia. To let everybody see you get on that Greyhound and wave bye-bye, brother, because professional wrestling has no place for you. No place for a manager. What is a manager? All he does is take people's money. But I'm going to tell you something. Tonight in Marietta, Georgia, me and the AA boys, Anderson and Armstrong, are coming to Marietta tonight. It's a handicap match, that's for sure. But, brother, with you in there, it makes 2 to 2.5. And we're going to take up these fists. We're going to put tape all around. It's going to be a cape fist match, brother. There's going to be some eyes open, some ears swelled up, some nose pop. Somebody's going to get hurt in my hometown, brother. And if I get close to you, Peter,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the Wrestling Conversation, a tribute to Bullet Bob Armstrong, and we are going to be joined by Jack Lord, Rodney West, and Charlie Platt. Welcome all to this tribute to Bullet Bob Armstrong. Charlie, you spent a lot of time with Bob Armstrong throughout the years.
Man, oh man, let me just open up by saying this. We have lost, number one, the four of us and anybody else that's ever been associated with this thing down south we call the wrestling business. We've lost probably the best friend we've ever had.
Amen.
We've lost an icon, which that word gets thrown around not a lot, but Joseph James is an icon. He's a legend. He's bigger, or was, and he still is, bigger than life. I've seen a lot of people in this business pass away, and I hope I don't hurt any feelings, but if I do, get them off your shoulder, because I'm going to say this. I have seen a year ago Harley Race pass away, who was one of the greatest workers in the history of the business. I've seen Dusty Rhodes pass away. The list goes on and on and on and on, but boys, I've never seen anything to beat or compare to, not that it's a contest, the outpouring of love from not only the fans, but the four of us and everybody associated with this business. It's a tough time, but I think I want to look back at it as a happy time, Jack, because he was more concerned, a guy that was more concerned about how you were doing than he was.
Exactly.
I was honored to be asked by him to come see him, and our visit was the second day of August. He was more concerned about me and the loss of my mother back in May and some personal issues I might have been going through than he was of himself. That's the Bob Armstrong I knew. That's the Bob Armstrong I knew for years. Never heard him raise a voice. Uh, he may have in some places, but the most congenial, never heard him say no when somebody that might have been on an independent circuit that he was working a show asked for advice, asked for help. He took time. He took time with the fans. And these are just some of the reasons he was loved so much. And you got to look at it. I call those other names out, but Bob was not really a national character in the wrestling business. He was a regional guy. Tyrus last night on Fox News paid tribute to Bob Armstrong. It's the most amazing thing I have ever seen. And I look at it on a personal basis, and I'll let you guys join in when I say this. And if I get emotional, y'all just, hey, it is what it is. Isn't it? Yeah, it is what it is. But, I wonder how he got to be so big. Personality. A Marine becomes a fireman, becomes a professional wrestler, bigger than life on black and white television in the early 1960s. Think about it. Yeah. Think about it. But he could not have done it if there wasn't a God-given talent to hook up with people.
Yep.
That was Joseph James. In 1962, I remember watching him on black and white television in the living room in Enterprise, Alabama, where I grew up. Channel 3, Columbus, Georgia, maybe it was Channel 9. Fred Ward, hello to all our sick and shut-in friends. Hope you get up and at them real soon. That down-home personal touch, Bob Armstrong with a crew cut, I can picture it in my mind. Then, later, I got to work with my hero. What a life. Guys, what a life to get to work with your heroes. And in Enterprise, Alabama, we could watch Georgia wrestling with Fred Ward from Columbus, Georgia. Live. We got live wrestling from Channel 4 in Dothan, Gulf Coast. And guess what? If you had an antenna 50 feet tall, you could get Channel 6 in Tallahassee and see championship wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley again. I got to work with him. I'm a blessed individual. I mean, but tonight is as tough a deal that I have had with anybody in this business, because Bob and I got to be close. Close. We never ended a conversation without saying, I love you, man. He was that type of person. He had a heart of gold and raised 4 boys. No, let me rephrase that. Gail raised 5 boys, including Bob. She was the glue. Huh? Oh, I know he did.
I've heard him say that. Yeah.
So I'm not worried about any spirits haunting me tonight. I'm shooting on this deal because he said it. But she was the glue that held it all together. But think about this: married in a business that you guys know the pitfalls of. We all do that's been in it. Married to the same woman for 60 years and was just as much in love with her when she took her last breath about 6 weeks ago than he was the day he married her. Raised 4 boys, all that became a part of this crazy business that we call the wrestling business. All 4 of those boys, we lost Brad in 2012, but they were all married to the same woman.
Yeah.
What an example. He just didn't share the book with some of us that we could have used, that we could have saved some money on. But Joseph, Melton James, Bob Armstrong, the Bullet, then you had Pep, and then you had Gobby. And if you had a chance to look at Tracy James's daughter-in-law's page on Facebook, some of their kids in the James family, the grandkids, writing tributes to their grandfather. He and Gail are up there tonight looking down, and they are smiling a smile that we can only imagine, because those kids, grandkids, appreciated what their grandmother and grandfather did for them all through the years, and respected the life that they lived. I'll let some of y'all join in. I just had to get that off my chest. I got a story I want to tell later on if I could. But he my gosh, you West boys, y'all got to see it. Y'all were a part of it. And what a guy. And
Yes.
You got to wonder if there's a mask versus mask match coming up in heaven one day real soon. The Bullet against Johnny Walker or something, just for fun, because there's so many we've lost here lately that just were the cream of the crop. And Johnny Walker is right there with him, man. Stars that both came out of Georgia. I mean, they made their mark on the industry out of the state of Georgia. What about it, Brent?
Jack, give me your thoughts on Bob Armstrong.
Well, everything that was right about professional wrestling was Bob Armstrong. He took care of all of us. All Bob ever asked out of anybody was your best effort. And he never raised his voice to me. I remember getting in with Continental, asking your dad, at some point of, hey, I got bad knees. I'm not going to last forever. I want to learn how to do this behind the scenes stuff. So, what do I do? And he took me over to Bob, who I had met but never really talked to there because he was always working. I didn't want to interrupt him. And in a commercial break, Bob had the headphones off and smoking that ever-present cigarette. And he told Bob what I said, and Bob looked up at me and he said, "You want to learn how to do what I do?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Pull up a chair, sit down, and shut up." And that's what I did every week. And when we did our TV in Chattanooga, and it was needing somebody to sit with those headphones on and do that job, I could sit there and do it because Bob taught me, and I've applied so many things. I always say I'm a Ron West guy, but I'm a Bullet Bob guy too. Everything I do when I book and run shows, I do from the lessons they taught me. And the love I have for him, man, I'm struggling holding it together. He was a good one.
15-year-old kid comes to Bullet Bob Armstrong, and he asked him, he said, "Hey, listen, I noticed you don't have no T-shirts, photographs, a lot of stuff out there." So he said, "No, I don't really worry about that." A 15-year-old kid comes to him and says, I think I could do that for you. I think I could order your shirts. I think I could do I could get all that stuff for you. And he put everything, he put all that and said, okay, great, yeah, you could. And that was me, and he allowed me to do that at 15 years old. And you see some of the stuff that I ordered behind Rodney right there, that I ordered for him, and I sold it. Me and Rodney both sold it, matches and just other things that Bob. He was a great guy. Rodney, give us your thoughts on it.
Well, he was always family, and he always treated you like family. I had to, not just in the wrestling business, he always made sure we was okay, and watching out for us. Somebody did something wrong or something and said something to us, he was the first one to say, "Hey, you don't be talking to him that way." I had opportunity in Pensacola. I did the Cole Brothers Circus. And so I gave him a call to see if he wanted any tickets to the circus. He said, "Well, sure, I want some tickets, but while you're in town, you got to come by the house." I said, he said, "I expect to see you over here at the house. Me and Gail will be looking for you." And he said, "I want you to come over." Well, I come over, and it was like being at home. We went over there, and we sit, and he talked about, I talked about going to the wrestling reunion. I said, I saw Eddie Sullivan down there, and he said, he hasn't changed over the years. And he said, "Well, that's because he never did look any good in the first place." And then he said, "This boy must be hungry." So Gail, me and Bob went over and visit with Adrian for a minute. And while we was gone, Gail went out and got us some chicken. And we sat there and had dinner. And like I said, it was family, and he was family. The way he was treated.
We have a lot of comments coming in. Let's grab some of the comments from people who have sent in their thoughts and memories of Bob. Joseph Taylor said, "Rest in peace, Bullet." Donald Dunlap said, "I grew up in the South. Bullet always will stand for all that we were meant to be. No racial, no, it just stood up for people. God bless the Bullet." David Taylor said, "Rest in peace, Bob." Richard Hood is with us. He said, "Good evening, gentlemen, and rest in peace, Bob Armstrong." Mickey Mayfield, he sent his rest in peace, Bob Armstrong. Lots of memories. Bob Collins is right. Rest in peace, and he was one tough SOB. No doubt. We all know that. Harvey Strickland sent his prayers to the family. Charles Alford also sent his prayers as well. Lee Shelton said, "I am sorry to hear about a brother of ours that we lost. God bless his family." Tim Sewell, I guess how you say that. "There will be no other Bob Armstrong. There is only."
Exactly right about that.
Wayne Smith sent his prayers in. Charles said, "Tell my dad hello in heaven. He was a fan of yours, sir." Thank you, Charles. Retro Rob has joined us and on our tribute. If you're just tuning in, it's a tribute to Bullet Bob Armstrong. Dennis Mitchell said, "Bob Armstrong will be missed. Bob was bad to the bone. Bob Armstrong's feud with Roddy Piper and his use of bad guy in Southeastern against Colonel Buck Robley will be remembered. I'm sure Fannie Mae is taking heart also." Thanks, Dennis Mitchell. I think Fannie Mae was his benefactor. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Dennis Mitchell, prayer for his family also. Kevin Penley asked, "Evening, guys, who gave Bob the Armstrong name? Do you know, Charlie?"
I have. I'll be honest with you. He told me that a few years back, and I cannot remember the whole story. It might have been Paul Jones or whoever was promoting Atlanta, or it might have been Fred Ward. It was somebody in the business in Georgia where he came, but it was either Fred Ward or Paul Jones or somebody like that.
Terry Listograph has joined us. Thank you so much, Terry. Michael Barr, prayers out to the Armstrong family and condolences to the family. Let's see. There are a few families in wrestling: the Harts in Canada, the Von Erichs in Texas, and the Armstrongs in the Southeast. That is true.
Yeah.
Adam, my childhood is dying off. Adam Emerson. Unfortunately, we have lost a lot of the greats in professional wrestling, no doubt. James William Lawrence III, rest in peace, Bullet. My heart goes out to all of you. Tabby Owens also said, "Rest in peace, Bob Armstrong." Kevin Finley said, "Charlie, I'm glad you're here."
Glad to be here.
Michael Barr said, "Charlie, God bless you, brother." And this has hit many of us wrestling friends from the Southeast and we the fans as well. Rest in peace by Wayne Dobbs. Rick Brooks said, "I had the great pleasure of seeing Bullet Bob Armstrong in person against Rowdy Roddy Piper on 2 cards in a row for Mid-Atlantic Wrestling at the Cincinnati Gardens in 1982. That was a great feud." We're going to stop right there because I think we need to talk about that, the Bob Armstrong Roddy Piper feud. That was put together very good. Rodney, would you like to tell the people a little bit about that feud?
Well, Roddy Piper was in Atlanta, of course. He was doing color commentary with Gordon Soley. And all of a sudden, Roddy Piper, who had a mutual admiration association with Gary Hart and the Great Kabuki, then starts to pick on Bob Armstrong and Brad. He was specifically on Brad because Brad seemed to be doing all the wrestling and he was taking it out. So it built up and built up over weeks and weeks. And who else but Bob Armstrong could stand toe-to-toe with Roddy Piper on the mic? Nobody except for Bob Armstrong. And I think in every single exchange that Piper and Bob had, Bob came out on top in every single one of them. It was classic. It was what it means to be to know what you're doing, to have experience. And it showed all that experience paying off with Piper and with Bob. It was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful thing to watch as these two professionals go at it. And it was building and building until that big explosion where Piper was out there. He was goading Bob into saying, they were holding Bob back. No one can hold him. If it was me, they could never hold me back. And while Piper had his jacket off, turned back to Gordon, he was talking, and here comes Bob with that big chop. You could hear the chop all over the place, and then the place goes bananas if they had to pull him apart. It was awesome. It was awesome.
That was a great feud. And I would think if Bob Armstrong is known nationwide, it's probably off of that one feud he had with Roddy Piper. Don't y'all agree?
Yeah, I agree with that.
It was just beautiful. And then Gary Hart and Kabuki, all of those just seasoned professionals at their very, very best. It was awesome.
Jason Moore, rest in peace. The legend will never be forgotten. Donald Owen said, "A pleasure of meeting and speaking with Bob at a couple of fan fests. He always seemed pleased to speak with the fans." Tim, go ahead.
I got a question. Maybe Jack and the three of y'all, this thought just kind of hit me. Bob started in 61, 62, being on television. And one reason he was so big in, say, Dothan and this area, back up through Columbus, especially right here in this area, the guy was on television from 1961-62 all the way through 1989. Now, Jack, do the math, and do you know of any other wrestler in the history of the business that was in the main event or semifinal main event from 1962 to 1989?
Absolutely not. And even years after Bob was no longer on TV, every show he went to, people still came to see him.
Every Continental Southeastern Wrestling reunion that's been held, including the last one, which was this past May, was a year ago. This one has been postponed because of the COVID. It always amazed me. And hats off to Dennis Gale for bringing in stars from every era of the business and different type people. Like last year, Abdullah was there. Jake the Snake Roberts brought in some big names back a few years back. Arn Anderson, and a lot of big names that brought in. But you look at the autograph tables, and the longest line was waiting to see the Bullet. That just always. But if you take in consideration how many generations he touched in 1962, Grandpa was watching wrestling with his son, who was watching wrestling with his son, and Bob has been a hand-me-down. Look, from all these different generations, like no other guy I have ever seen or could imagine being. And that's why he is bigger than life, and why we know we have lost an icon and a legend in the business, and there'll never be another. I mean,
No.
big Hulk Hogan, yeah, big national star, but nothing to compare to the personality and the love received from the fans like Bob Armstrong. Period.
Yeah, I agree. We saw him, and I guess it was the first time we saw him was sometime in 1975, 76 is more I can remember him more. And I can remember going to Columbus, Georgia, the Manesswood Auditorium, and he could make a headlock entertaining for 15 minutes.
Oh yeah.
That's how good Bob Armstrong was.
When you said 76, Brent, let me throw this in right quick. Do you remember the 1976 Chrysler New Yorker Imperial, that big, long, looked like two Sherman tanks put together, burgundy in color, with a 440 cubic inch engine and a 4-barrel carburetor as big as your TV tray? Ask me, how many times did you ride with Bob through the years, Charlie? One. And I got, the good Lord saved me at least 4 times. I got salvation 4 times and a rededication on a trip from Gulf Breeze to Pensacola or to Mobile, wherever it was. I can't even remember now. But that was one thing you didn't want to do. Let Bob drive.
Now, I rode with him in 1988, I think, a couple of times while we were in the USA Championship Wrestling, and now he did good then. He didn't scare me any, but
well, if he did, you weren't gonna say anything anyway.
No, I wouldn't have said nothing. I might have been sitting there going, "Oh man," but
is there something wrong with your seat?
Here's a Bobby Simmons story. Now, this is back when Bobby was very, very young. And Bobby and I talked the other night a good bit on the phone, and we were sharing stories. And of course, anybody that knew Bob personally knew that he was a big music fan. I mean, he could if he could get in a contest on Name That Tune, he'd be a millionaire, because he just knew everything about the old rock and roll days and stuff like that. But I learned something from Simmons I did not know. And that fact was, Simmons was very, very young. And Bobby, who is now pastor and pastors a church up there close to Atlanta somewhere, he said, we would listen to Southern gospel music on the 8-tracks, wide open, riding down the road, he and Bob. I said, well, I got you beat. He said, how? I said, I used to have to travel with Don Carson and Dick Dunn. They would have it wide open in Dick Dunn's Cadillac on the 8-track player with a Happy Goodman family, and both of them singing bass as loud as they could. But some of the things we learned about our friends through the years, Bob, my gosh, you just story after story after story can be told of just what the West boys and Jack and I know. But it was all good, you know. I go back to what Jack said. I said it earlier. He never raised his voice. I never saw him lose his temper, get mad, and he always cared about everybody. And I saw a comment you might want to put up on the screen a little bit later on that our buddy Larry Brock said that was so true. He never complained about anything.
No.
Even when we get partially canceled TV in Dothan because of some stupid tennis match or something like that, Bob would just, some of the rest of them might go crazy and foam at the mouth, but Bob would say, well, we'll do what we can do. And we'd get to the farm center and everything would be okay. So he had a great outlook on everything.
He did. I remember one time me and Tracy Smothers kind of got into an argument in the back in the State Fair Arena in Birmingham. And all Bob did, he walked out real calm and said, Brent. And that's all he did. So I left, and Tracy just kept on. He looked at Tracy and said, I won't tell you, but one more time. He didn't raise his voice, but he just said, I will not talk to you, but one more time. And Tracy went as well. I mean, he didn't have to yell. He didn't have to scream. You knew that he meant business. It wasn't that he was going to tell you 3 or 4 times. I think Jack fell off. Let's bring you back in.
Yeah.
All right, let's get some more people on here that came on. Jack Patterson said, I will miss Bullet Bob Armstrong and everything he taught me every time I wrestled him. I loved him and I always called him my daddy of wrestling. Lynn Gross said, evening, gentlemen, fantastic tribute to Mr. Bob. Quentin Ward, a huge loss for the wrestling world. Bullet was a great man, a wrestler larger than life, loved his family. Sandra Hunt said, I met and talked with Mr. Armstrong several times, and he always greeted me like an old friend. Man, that meant the world to me. He was my dad's favorite as well as mine, and Dad thought Bob was the coolest dude ever. Of course, I thought my dad was the coolest dude ever, but Bob was really a close second. Good story, Sandra. Michael Barr, same here, Charlie. I remember when him and all his sons had a reunion match at the Civic Center in Dothan, Alabama. He asked me if I would stand beside him and his sons while they had their picture taken next to the ring. As an Army veteran, a salute to Mr. James. May he rest in peace. Let's see. Mark Hartley, one of the favorites, mostly because of being from Georgia and big part of Georgia Championship Wrestling from the mid-70s. Every Saturday night on TBS, not sure that's what it was then. I believe it might have been. My dad's brothers and me would all watch wrestling. Bob Armstrong was my favorite, and wrestling too. Also liked the Spuller, but Bob Armstrong was always a favorite of mine. Georgia Championship Wrestling, that's where we saw him as well the first time in there. It was, he said it was a live Atlanta wrestling.
Yeah.
That is true. Colton Martin said, I remember being about 12 years old, and he was at I guess that's Alabama Championship Wrestling, Jack, ACW.
Yep, it is. Yep.
And Aniston. I got to meet him and talk a little bit, but he was one of the nicest people you will ever meet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Bob versus Frank the Flame Barhill that night.
Probably was. They wrestled each other quite a bit in that area.
Sean, a good one, said Johnny Walker and Bob were not only great wrestlers, but great men.
Yes.
Sean Goodman, Jack, Lord, I worked a lot of wrestling shows and scared you with Bob and yourself. I rank you up there too, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. I may not get to everybody's because there's a bunch of them that's coming in. So if I don't get to them, I apologize. There's a lot of stuff coming in. So Tommy Shamu said legacy. That is true. The Armstrong legacy. Larry Brock did say Bob never complained about anything. But also now you also knew not to complain to him about anything. Because he was a matter of fact to you, though. So you knew not to say much to him because you number one, you knew you weren't going to whip him.
No.
You knew that wasn't going to happen. Let's see. Doug Masters, rest in peace, sir. And T. Langston said, great memories of Saturday nights in Dothan, Houston County Farm Center. Charlie and Bob had a lot of memories. Russell Bell, Bob made wrestling look real. This is true. He did do.
That is point. Yeah. And that's the reason he was successful too.
Especially the day on TV that he knocked Arn Anderson's toupee off.
Well, let me tell you my little story real quick about the first time I wrestled Bob. Now I had been around Bob and Continental, quite a bit, but we'd never wrestled before. So after the Continental shut down and he was starting to work a lot of indies, we wound up being on several shows together, and it was him and Scott and probably Brad too. There's usually the three of them would always come, or substitute Steve or Brian in there occasionally. But anyway, this was the first night I was going to wrestle Bob, and I was a little nervous. I'd known him, but I'd never been in the ring with him, and he was Bob Armstrong. So I'm standing back there, and the first thing that happened is the promoter comes over and says, okay, well, Bob, beat him however you want to. And Bob says, I'm not going to beat him. I'm built. We're building him. So he's going over. And the promoter just shook his head and walked off. And then Scott comes over to me and he says, have you ever worked that? And I said, no. He said, well, he's pretty light. Regardless of what he looks like, he's pretty light, except for those chops. Watch the chops. Well, I thought he was kidding. He wasn't kidding. And so we got in the ring, and I got that first one, and I thought, holy crap. I shaved all my body hair back then, which was a good thing, because otherwise there would have been a handprint there with no hair. So anyway, I called for about 4 more chops during that match. So when we got to the back, Bob said, usually guys want to stop at 1 chop. And I said, well, I was going over, so I thought I'd try to make you look good.
Learned your lesson on that one, didn't you, Jack?
Well, I was a suckler for punishment. I always called for them chops.
Let me say this right quick. A lot of people are doing a lot of things, posting, and people are sharing posts about Bob, and it's good, and I'm all for it. But some of the things that I've seen, I want to correct one. It's from Legacy. When you said the word legacy a minute ago, Brent, it made me thinking it's a kind of a halfway obit, and it said Bob's last match was in 2009. Well, Bob's last match, as far as I know, was here in Dothan. It was in May of 2019.
Yep.
It was against Russell Conaway as the assassin. Now, you got to understand, Bob had already been diagnosed with cancer for a year. He was a year and a few months into this cycle with cancer. And it was one of the reunion shows, and unbeknownst to us, Brian Road Dogg brought him up. And of course, the people got an extra pop with that because, hey, the Road Dogg shows up. He wasn't even advertised. And they go for the match, and Russell happily gets thrown into the ropes, comes off. Bob grabs a sleeper, puts him down. That was Bob's last match. That was about all he was probably able to do at that time, because I know he was in pain that night. But yet, there's some video that I'll have to find and post later on. There was a R&B big concert going on at the Peanut Festival Fairgrounds in the amphitheater, and we were in the building. And Bob was out there dancing, doing his deal with that ever-present Marlboro Light cigarette going. You can't make this stuff up. Bob, in fact, on August the 2nd, the time I had to speak with Brian and Tracy, his wife, about Bob and I's visit that they were not in on, Bob had to walk out on the porch and smoke a couple of his Marlboro Light cigarettes. I mean, he never did give them up. Now, on the other hand, when they took that saw to me, I hadn't wanted one ever since for some reason. But Bob and I were, hey, have you quit yet? Well, we're always on the phone. And when I quit after heart surgery, uh, we had to talk about weight after that because I said, you giving up those cigarettes yet? I'm trying. I'm working on it. I said, what are you down to? 2 packs a day. So he was something else. Let me tell this before we get into time thing. This is a personal, and this gets a little heavy, but we all know the funny things on Bob. We know stories about him beating up a guy that called him an old geezer in the parking lot of Winn-Dixie down there when he was 75 years old. A bodybuilder and a bouncer at a nightclub in Pensacola. He shouldn't have called it. He called it. Bob said, I took it one time, but the second time he called me an old geezer. He said, I just couldn't take anymore. That's a whole book. Cops come there, they arrest the guy that Bob attacked and beat up, not Bob, because who in the heck at Gulf Breeze is going to arrest Bob Armstrong? Bob had fessed up to me before about not being the most religious person in the world, and one of the reasons I went to see him and wanted to sure enough go when he wanted to see me August the 2nd was to make sure that Bob, are you okay with the Lord? And he was, which is good news for anybody to be able to be prepared when that time comes that you leave this world. But going back to the time when I almost left this world, in May of 2012, I had what the heart surgeon said was my third major heart attack and ended up in surgery. My son carried me to the emergency room that day. I gave him my cell phone. He took my cell phone. They started cutting clothes off of me. Carried me to the cath lab. Said, oh, we'll have you out we'll do a couple of stents and have you up back on TV Monday morning. And about that time, the doctor looked up there at the monitor and he says, we may need to do something else. Long story short, I had major heart surgery. When I got through with the surgery, the surgeon, Dr. Ed Plans, told the family it might be best to go ahead and make the final arrangements because he didn't think I was coming off the ventilator. Well, Bob had just got word that there was a problem, and he called my phone. My son told him what was going on. And as Brian said, we know this is true because Mom told the story too. Bob at that point goes home and picks up Gail. Gail, come on, get in the car. Where are we going, Pep? We're going to the church. Now, Gail was a volunteer and worked part-time at her church there in Gulf Breeze. I don't think Bob was a regular attendee, but here's what happened. He says, you go in there and you tell that preacher and that bunch that my best friend is dying and I want him prayed for and I want him on every prayer list you can get him on. Now, y'all know the guy. You can see him telling poor Gail, you go in there and get him prayed for.
Yeah.
It was prayers by thousands of people that I'm here tonight and able to pay honor to one of my best friends of all time. When I finally came to after 7 days on the ventilator, another 3 days go by and they said, well, we can start bringing him copies of some of the emails that's coming into the TV station. Now I look down. You're on our prayer list. We're praying for your healing. First Baptist Church of Titusville, Florida. First United Methodist Church of Jacksonville. Every church stacks of it from all over Florida. I said, how in the heck? Who in the heck did that? And later I would find out it was my friend. So way back then in 2012, he knew of the power of prayer. and he wanted his friend prayed for.
Yeah.
And I will forever, ever be indebted to Joseph James for making Gail get me on those prayer lists. And it's like Brian said, Mom told the story to you. You know it's true. And that was the side of Bob Armstrong some people might not have known, but it goes hand in hand with the character and the love that he had for the fans, for the business, and for his family. Family was always first.
Yep, I agree. Jack, any more comments about Bob before we go through some more of the people?
Yeah, we were talking about his temper a little while ago. I remember when he broke his hand. Charlie, you remember when he broke his hand with uh, the guy that road rage incident? The guy was cutting him off and followed him
That's the
up.
guy. No, that's the guy in the parking lot of the grocery store.
No, this was the guy. This was the guy that cut him off in traffic. And when Bob tried to pull off on an exit, he pulled up and stopped him
That's
and
right.
got out. And Bob hit him so hard that it broke Bob's hand. And Bob came with this cast on his hand to the show, and I said, "What happened?" And he told me, and I said, "Well, what could have happened if you hadn't or if he had come back on you?" And he said, "Well, it knocked him out because he was a big one, and if I hadn't have done it, I'd have been in a lot of trouble."
He didn't even care. We used him on a show. I can't remember the year it was, but him and Scott came, and we were in Anion, Alabama at the fair. And Louis Fabiano, and I can't remember the other guy, but for whatever, Louis Sabagoli, those two guys, they didn't want to do the job for Bob and Scott in a tag match. So I go over there and I tell Bob, I said, "Listen, I gave them the finish, and they just said they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do the finish." He said, "Oh, that's all right. Go over there and tell them whatever they want to do. They want to roll me up, beat me, 1, 2, 3." He said, "I don't care." He said, "It ain't gonna hurt me one bit." He said, "This whatever they want to do." So I go back over and I tell the two Louis, I said, "Listen, they just said whatever you want to do." He said, "Do you just tell them when it's time for you to? Did you want to go home?" They said, and I could see something in their face. You could just tell something in their face. This got real, and they said, "Well, let me think about this for just a second. What did you say you wanted to do in that finish?" Because I think they thought, "Well, we're fixing to get beat up right here in the ring." But he wouldn't have done it. He would have let him roll him up 1, 2, 3, and he wouldn't have cared because it wasn't that important. He knew that was not important when it came to the wrestling business of who won and lost. Because he said, "I'll get my stuff at the back." He said, Yeah, but he was Rodney, any other stories, and then we'll go back to
I have to talk about his run with the Stomper in Tennessee. That was actually the first time I remember seeing Bob against the Mongolian Stomper, and that was classic stuff. In fact, I watched some earlier, and we talked about the headlock. He was working the headlock on the Stomper, and the more he ratcheted up, the people started to stand in the Mid-South Coliseum. It was awesome. And he could do the exact same thing with the arm, twisting a guy's arm or doing a wrist lock. He was just brilliant. And the way that his body language was able to convey what was going on, it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And like I said, the run with the Stomper, many run with the Stomper, but that particular run with the Stomper was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
There's some, Rodney, speaking of that, there is was something out there on Facebook that goes back to the Southeastern run with the Stomper in Knoxville. And it was on YouTube for a while. I haven't looked for it in a while, but it was so amazing because the Kincaid guy that did the tape, he didn't tape up there. This is before video, guys. This is before videotape. This is still film in like 76, somewhere along there. And in the Knoxville Arena, the big auditorium, they had the one big light over the ring, and everything else would be dark. And that old film rolling and, kind of faded out. And Bob and Archie working, oh my gosh. It would bring chills when you saw, how they were just beating the living hell out of each other, and
Yeah.
you knew some of those things were landing from the way you see eyes being crossed. Poor old Archie, Archie, he was selling it, but those guys, they had the run in Memphis, they had the run in Knoxville, they had the run in the south end of the territory. Oh my gosh, how many stories could be told off of just those two?
And the interviews, there was no one that could do an interview. That just in the package that we had at the beginning of the show, the little tribute video, when he tells that was about Bobby Heenan, and he says, "Well, you know what? It'll be 2.5 men when we go against you." Just superb interviews that he could do. There was no other that could do an interview like Bob Armstrong.
He could make you, if nobody knows who you are, he can do it in one interview. He can establish you. He can give you credibility in one interview. That's talent. That's talent.
Jason Morris said, "Bullet will forever live here in Coleman, Alabama." By the way, that's the town, Coleman, Alabama. Bob Armstrong fired the Rockers right there in that town.
I was there.
Dr. Philbo Grice Bob was a class act. No worries. He would not do anything in bad taste. This is true. You knew when you had Bob Armstrong on a card, he wasn't going to do anything wrong. Norman Card said, "I love the feud he had with Mr. Saito in the state of Georgia, which later would involve Mr. Wrestling too." Yeah, they had judo jacket matches. Just a great run with Saito. I think that was right when he left. He might have went from there. Saito might have went there to Southeastern, or he may have been the opposite way, because I know Bob was helping book Georgia Championship Wrestling at the time. Les Martin said, "Got to watch him on Superstation growing up." Donovan Waltrip said, "Bullet Bob was bad to the bone." The Bullet was over tremendously. 1985, 86, Bullet was over. Those shirts you see in the background, you'd order your 12 of each, and they'd be sold on Monday night. You didn't even have enough to go nowhere else. You'd sell them in Birmingham, Alabama, and you'd have to reorder. You'd get them enough for Birmingham. You'd sell them. You still wouldn't have enough. You'd order double that amount. You'd sell them in Birmingham, Alabama.
Never had anything for Knoxville coming up. We had to run to get pictures of Bob. We had to run to a photomat place just to get it. And the people thought he was the Blue Cyclone in these pictures.
I used to give him wads of money back in those days. So he'd give it all to
Gail. And then Gail, she just puts it up. He never did know how much.
Bishop Michael Nesby said, "I had the pleasure to meet Bullet at the Cobb County Civic Center during the Georgia Championship Wrestling show." Sue Hill, "If anyone was putting on the show in Georgia, you could always count on a sold-out show as long as Bob was on the card. I miss him, and it's hard to believe he's gone." Gary Blackwood, he came on sending the prayers to the Armstrong family. Melissa asked this question, Charlie: "How hard was that slap from Bob?"
Not as hard as the one I gave him back, but the bad thing on that one, the one that I gave him back, I had it gauged pretty well, Jack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you were dealing with Ron holding him from behind. No glasses on. Bob, no glasses on. Me, no glasses on. And we're talking about the 3 blind mice. What happened was Bob had a fever of 104 degrees the Saturday we did that deal. He was sweating like he had done an hour in the farm center, and that was the only appearance he made on TV that day. And he grabs me, and then Ron grabs him, and I go, about the time I came up with to pull the slap, Ron, he slips out of Ron's hands. He was sweating, and I kind of hit him in the jaw pretty heavy with this right here. It was payback was hell on the old man at that point. He would have told you that. It was, but yeah, it was a good slap. It was. I wanted it to be a good slap, and it got over. It really got over. Drew a lot of money.
Good
A
stuff.
lot of money.
Yeah, good stuff. I have that on video somewhere. So,
I
Adelu
want
said,
it.
"Rest in." I have it somewhere. I have to.
Well, look.
I have
I
300
I
tapes.
want to do this. I'm gonna put out a reward for you to get me a copy of that. I want put out a reward too, on anyone who has the match with Bob Armstrong wrestling Arn Anderson. It would be the last match of the day on the Southeastern circuit, on the Southeastern program. And yours truly doing the play-by-play with color by none other than Ric Flair. That's the day. A lot of people never figured out what happened, but Bob did the karate thing in the corner on Arn, and the tape grabbed up under the toupee and took it up, took 2 stitches out. He looked like an Indian had got a hold of him.
How
I love
did the show do that? Hey, how did the show do at the farm center that night?
Oh, buddy. Well, see, here's the funny part. The funny part of that show was, dumb me, when it happened, you always watch the monitor. And Flair and I were watching the monitor. But when it happened, we saw that in the monitor, but we both looked in the ring up there to make sure what we saw in the monitor really happened. Well, what we saw in the monitor really happened, and you could see a little bit of blood running out of those 2 places where it was stitched, and a 3rd stitch holding it on. And you got to understand, we'd done a personality profile on this, that it was a NWA World Heavyweight Championship match. It wasn't just for Dothan. It was going around the whole territory: Birmingham, Mobile, Montgomery, and I think even up in North Alabama. They had Flair for a week. And Indian strap match rules. And this dumb Southeast Alabama redneck made the dumb mistake of looking at Flair and saying, "You better watch him, Rick. He's scalping them already." And when I said that, Flair lost it. And when he lost it, I lost it. And we're sitting there laughing our butts off. And all of a sudden, the finish has happened. He had rolled Arn up, and Bob was standing right in front of us looking like, "Well, now, Flair, are you going to get your butt up and do what we're supposed to do? And that's go off the air fighting." And we finally got back in the program. But Bob and I, every time we reminisced about that, we laughed our butts off, because you can't make that stuff up. If you've got that, Brent, I want a copy of it.
I don't remember seeing that. The only time I remember I have a tape of Arn having stomach problems at TBS Studios. Now I do have that tape that he.
Oh, I don't care about those stomach problems.
Well, he had white tights that night, so you could. Imagine what happened to Arn Anderson live on TBS.
Yeah, he was he aimed it at the audience, and the audience just rolling laughing.
Oh,
I'm surprised the audience didn't jump up and run.
Mike Hadley is with us. Bob Armstrong, not only a great wrestler, but a great person, to family man as well. Rest in peace, Bob. Russell Bell. Don't forget the Gilberts in Tennessee. Yes, Tommy Gilbert, Eddie Gilbert, a great family. Mike Schaefer, listening in Dothan, Alabama, seen Bullet Bob many times, one of the best. Bishop Nesby said prayers and sympathy to the Armstrong family. One of the true legends and greats of pro wrestling, no doubt. There is no better. Bob Armstrong was superb. Whether he was the Bullet, the Jaw Jacker, he had a couple of different deals he went by. He was definitely great. Another great one gone from the good old days here in Georgia wrestling. Oh, Chris Studer, prayer for the family. Thank you so much. Let's see. Let's go on down some people that we haven't talked to. James Smith, remembering Bob, the wrestling fireman.
That's right.
Dennis Cook, good evening from Winslow, Arizona. Great
Wow.
memories of Bullet Bob Armstrong. I think Dennis used to live, if I'm not for sure, I think he used to live in the southeastern top area, maybe Pensacola, Florida, or something. If I'm Les Walters from Hamilton, Alabama, did business with him for many years. Then one of the times when we were the Hamilton CJs, brought wrestling to town sometime in the 1980s. If my memory doesn't fail me, Bullet Bob was on the Continental Championship Wrestling and fought the Flame, who was one big son of a gun. But before the show began, Bob asked me where he could go to get a good steak. I told him, come on, and we go to the Holiday Inn and get one. We sat there, enjoyed a great meal, and talked family and wrestling. Had a great time that night during the match. And anybody that ran into Bob Armstrong would tell you he was always a nice man. Always. Yep. There was never a time he was rude to anyone. I don't think I ever seen him be rude to anybody.
No. What I was going to say, Bob actually came in, and I did not know this until Bob told me the story. I thought the first time Bob appeared in Dothan was for Southeastern, like in 1978. But Bob, the gracious person he was, told the story on my early morning show one morning, not too many years ago, that he actually, and this would have been right after probably TBS, wrestling was on TBS and everybody had cable, but it was in the Gulf Coast days. Al Roberts, who was sports director at WTVY and did the ring announcing back then. This is before I even started in '76. Al Roberts went and picked him up at the airport and talked about what a great guy Al was, and we had talked about how Al had passed away a couple of years before that interview, and just always being so kind to other people. The fans knew him as the wrestler, and they knew him as their hero, and for a while the heel that they hated for a little short period of time, and he did a good job in that role. But we all knew him, and even a lot of the fans. Let me back up and say, the fans, when they talked to him, I think could feel what Joseph James Bob Armstrong was all about. And you know how you can, judge a person by the first impression you get when you meet them. Bob was the type that personality and the care that he had for the fans and what he was doing came across to him. And that's something that's very, very, very rare in that industry we used to call professional wrestling. I mean, I've seen some of the guys, not calling any names, not putting anybody down, that, oh, get the heck out of here, or the attitude, get the heck out of here. I don't want to be bothered. You guys are shaking your heads. Y'all know, y'all have seen it, and we don't have to call any names, but Bob always took time for the fans. Bob knew that the way he treated them would be the way he put food on the table, even way back in the days when he started, and all the way up to 2019 when he finally had to quit doing the shows he was doing. And here's one more thing. He, on August 2nd, we were sitting there talking. He says, is Dennis going to have his show? And that show was supposed to be in August. I said, no, Bob, because of the COVID, it's been put off to November. He said, well, I don't guess I'll make another show. I was looking forward to going in a couple of weeks. A guy who was able to sit up and visit with me for an hour and a half before he had to go back to bed. He was looking forward to one more reunion show to be with the fans and to be with his extended family, like the four of us you see on the screen. Now, man, when you know it is your time and you want to go one more time out there and are caring about those people, that's a genuine human being. Keep the James family, whether you know them by James or whether you know them by Armstrong, keep all of them in your prayers. They're having a hard time with this. This isn't an easy thing. They have lost their mom and their dad within a 2-month period. And that's a tough, tough pill to swallow when you lose a parent. And when you lose the parents that were together for 60 years, and you saw the love and you felt the love from that family unit, it's tough. I don't know what it would feel like, but I can only imagine. And in the coming days up through Saturday when the funeral will take place, keep Brian, keep Scott, keep Steve, their wives, their children, and in some cases, Brian's got a grandchild. Keep them all in your prayers, because that's a tight-knit family that needs our love and support and prayers right now.
Yep. Brian Bodie Green asked the question, why did Bob go by Jim Durango in 72 to Japan?
I wasn't there.
I do. Now, I will say I do know he went there as Jim Durango, because there's information that I've got photographs of him wrestling in Japan, and evidently somebody said Jim Durango, and he went over there with I'm thinking Crazy Luke Graham is who he went over there with. So he told some stories to me one time. We were laying out in the sun in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he was telling us some stories about a trip that he made to Korea one time, and that was very interesting. I'll have to share one of these days on here. My grandma loved the Armstrongs, Charles Alford said. Richard Hood asked, guys, when did Bob start wrestling full time? That would have been 66, wouldn't it?
I believe that's right. We covered that in one of our podcasts before.
And I think if you go back to, I think we got the number one video we did on Bob. I think we did say he started in 1966 full time. So, yep. Jack said Bob Armstrong was bad to the bone. Richard Dye with us, fellow wrestler. Hello, gentlemen. Learned a lot from Bob by just listening. Like you said, I had the honor of wrestling all the Armstrongs. Bob was a man amongst men. Let's see. Kevin Penley said, I heard Bob mention Daryl Cochran a lot. Can you tell me about him? Charlie, did you know Daryl Cochran? Because I don't think I ever met him.
I never met Daryl, but I heard all the stories of Daryl, and Daryl was coming to visit him in Gulf Breeze when they lived before they moved to the condo, when they had the house there in Gulf Breeze, and I missed him by like a few hours. But Daryl was very influential. They worked out together, and very influential in Bob in the wrestling business.
Jason Kitchen said Bob Armstrong was undeniably a great wrestler. I'm glad to hear he was always a great human being. A wonderful tribute, guys. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jason. Well, let's see. Jack did say Bob known as the Georgia Jawjacker as well. He did that many times. No doubt he was in the mask several times. The Bullet probably being one of his biggest things. He did. Bubba Griffin in the house. He says the Armstrongs a great family. Mickey Mayfield said one person that could make a fireman's carry believable as a finishing move. No doubt. Michael Storbert said, "Hello, guys. Bob was a great guy. Always took the time for us fans." Yeah, yes, he did. Daniel Harbin is on here as well. James Meeks said, "First time I ever saw Bob was during his feud with Roger Kirby. I was a fan right then. My first Bob Armstrong
Wow.
match was him and Brad against the Masked Superstar and Super Destroyer in
Yeah.
Chattanooga, Tennessee. Yes,
Wow.
I personally think he was at his best during the Continental, Smoky Mountain, and USA Championship Wrestling days. Rest in peace, Bullet." Thank you, James. Donovan Graham didn't know Bob and Ken Lucas was Gulf Coast Tag Team Champions in 1970. Were they Gulf Coast Tag Team Champions, Charlie?
That might have been when they, I don't know. That was before my time. I started in 76. I don't remember Bob being in here, though, watching as a fan. I would have been about 15 years old at the time. So I don't remember. No, I don't remember that. Sure don't. Oh, to the two guys up on the top.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of people in the business over the last few days. From the night he passed away, I was on the phone till like 1 o'clock in the morning with the likes of Pat Rose, Randy Rose, and the list would cover this cabin. But a guy today said, I told him, I said, I got to get home. I'm gonna do a little thing with the West Boys tonight. He said, well, tell them I said hello and best wishes. Wildcat Wendell Cooley says hello to
Hey,
you
Wildcat.
guys and
Yeah.
to all the fans as well. And he was, the people that are they're coming in to show their respects. It's just unbelievable.
Yes, it is. Now, we don't usually use profanity within this program, but I think we
Since
do
when?
we do have to use we do we do have to use this profanity that Melissa sent in to us because it was one of Bob's greatest quotes of all time. A quote from Bob Armstrong that is etched in my brain: "Jackasses don't run with racehorses." Said
Amen.
that said that many times in his interview. Thank you very much, Melissa, for bringing that memory up to us. Edward,
On that,
me,
that
Bullet will be
the live
missed.
the live tribute we did here in Dothan back in November, a lot of guys sent in interviews to be a part of it, and the Honky Tonk Man was one of them. And Wayne said, you know, when he was in here, they used to call him Rhymer Bob, because he never did an interview without lines rhyming, and that was true. He could do it, and he never that well, as many years as I did it, a lot of people do not believe this because they read these podcasts and listen to podcasts and read blogs today about how Vince sits there and tells everybody what to do, or Triple H tells everybody what to do, or whatever producer it might be, Arn with the other group, or Tully or whatever. They're in their ear telling them what to do and write these interview scripts. I never saw a script the whole time I did this mess. Never saw a script. In fact, the last time I was on, Brent held up a piece of paper, and we knew that Brent West was going to wrestle Jack Lord in the first match. And we knew what the second match was going to be. We knew what the third, we knew what the fourth, and we knew who did interviews in between. But never did I ever see a cue card at the TV station or at any arena of where we did the shows. Did you guys?
Nope.
No,
Nope.
Nope.
And
no.
people don't believe me when I say that, but they talk about how we practice so much. Did any of y'all ever go to a practice?
Not that I remember now.
No.
It was very easy back then. The people were so good at what they did. You had to tell just very little what you needed to tell, and then move on and let them do their job. And that was the best. And the
Exactly.
best were the Armstrongs. When we didn't have the Armstrongs on the card, it was like pulling teeth. It was bad. I tell you right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't even have to tell
Brad
them
could do a
something.
good interview.
You could tell them, say, "Listen, Bob, man, I've been worried about something all day today. I didn't come up with a finish. Just listen, go 15 and y'all figure it out when you get out to the ring. And they would go out there and figure it out in the ring. And it was.
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right, let me see where I was at on here.
That's a lot there.
Tim LaFontaine. I always say his name. I know Tim LaFontaine. I think it's a beautiful name. I'll change my name to that, Tim. Greeting guys from Central New York.
Wow.
Bob had an amazing build into his senior years. Yes, Bob was in shape. Dad used to say, they used to tell him he'd always have this little thing that he would work out with before he get to the, before they get to the matches. He'd do it. He just keep on this rubber. And they said Dad and all them guys used to walk up to him and say, "Them arms look like they're getting a little smaller tonight, don't they?" And you could tell he would really start going with that.
You lose some weight there or something, Bob.
Yeah.
Smaller.
That was kind of mean, but you know how the wrestling business was. Tina Brown, you sure will be missed. I love you and fly high. I will see you on the other side. Rest in peace from Tina Brown. Let's see. Kevin Barkwell. I remember him saying, "I'm Southern born and Southern bred, and I will die. I'll be Southern dead." Kevin gained a great one. I'm tearing up right now. Again, thinking about one of my childhood favorites. He will miss and remember the highest regards. Daniel Hartman said Bob was an awesome man and one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. All the Armstrongs were. And when I was a kid, I always begged my dad to let's go to Birmingham to the Boutwell Auditorium to see Bob. And the boys whip butt every weekend. We live in Trenton, Alabama, which is far northeast corner of the state. So y'all, Birmingham was a drive for us. They were my all-time favorites growing up. Last time I'd seen Bob was at an American Championship Wrestling show in Boaz, Alabama, a few years ago. And I guess he ran out of it. I'm pretty sure he's going to certainly going to miss Bullet Bob Armstrong. Sandra, thank you so much. We enjoy it. I see a picture of Bob Armstrong and you in your deal there. Gail Elliott, awesome. Thank you so much, Gail. Melissa said no other wrestler could dance better than the Bullet.
Amen.
He could get out there and certainly when bad to the bone. Boy, I tell you what, anybody that wasn't in a building, when bad to the bone would hit, he would walk out to that building. They talk about a Hulk Hogan. Bullet Bob Armstrong was the Hulk Hogan of the South. And there's no doubt. Don't you agree, Jack?
Totally agree.
Because Michael said, from now on, every time I hear the song "Bad to the Bone," I will think.
You do. Every time you hear it, that's what you think, and you start doing that walk just like Bob. Go to the ring.
Sandra's got a couple other. It's easy. Anything goes from your nose to your toes.
That's
coming
right.
up with a lot of his sayings. Bob had a lot of sayings, a lot of quotes. That Tim said. Doing the promos will all start. Well, back then they were called interviews, Tim. I don't know. I have to go back and tell you, in the territory days, they wasn't called promos. They were called interviews. But I don't know when that started. Charlie, when did that start? Because did you call them promos?
We call them interviews. It's kind of like if you look at local news, which there is no local news. All these people are just vanilla these days, Jack. You know what I mean? All the different TV stations do the same thing. They call it on our show tonight. Well, hell, it was a newscast when I was growing up. You got the news. It was not a show.
Amen.
But
I think the news
died.
The news died with Walter Cronkite.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. But it was interviews. I never heard the word promo. Never. All the way to 89.
I didn't either. But some people will talk about it today that was in that era, and they'll call it that. And I'm thinking, where are y'all getting this promo thing from? Now maybe that's what they call it now. But the territory days were all interviews.
Exactly.
Let's see. I don't remember where I was at now. I don't want to miss somebody. I don't want somebody to think we missed them. We are not likely to see a Southern hero in wrestling again. Bullet Bob was one of the best examples. Truly, you are right about that. Territorial wrestling is the only way to produce icons like Bob Armstrong.
Yep.
I agree with that. Seaborn Systems said they had the pleasure to meet Bob in Canton, Georgia in 1993. It was one of those shows where Bob was in one match and the Bullet was in the next. Hey, I wonder if he got the double payoff. We knew, of course. We knew, of course.
Now in Canton, Georgia, would that be Ted Allen? Maybe.
Could have been Ted Allen. It could have been Ted.
That was one of his towns.
Could have been Ted Allen. Norman Carr said Bob Armstrong, martial arts expert, a former Marine, a professional firefighter, said by Gordon Soley.
Yep.
Many times, had great interviews with Gordon Soley. Jack Patterson said, I remember the time I was wrestling Bullet in Cantonment. Is that what they say, Florida?
Cantonment.
Okay, when we did the gimmick of the tights, and the fans thought I had a gimmick, and there was no gimmick. That was one of the best matches I had. Bob Armstrong special right there.
Yep.
He did that many times, and he could get it over like no other. No doubt about that. Let's see. Michael Barr. Some really great commentaries with the Bullet and Charlie. And the time way back when the Bullet asked Ron Fuller 9 times to be his tag team partner. And the Stud finally accepted him as a partner. And Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud, turned on the Bullet. Good stuff back then. You remember that, Charlie?
I remember it well. Let me put in a plug for our local. John Johnson did the article with me, which you can get on DothanEagle.com or Dothan Eagle, or you can look at my Facebook page. John he hit me from a broadside when he did the interview with me on Friday. He'd been writing since 1985. He's been at the Eagle, I think, about Bob Armstrong. He says, I want to know about your last visit with Bob. I want to know what took place. And I tell most of the story. But the other media around here, the station without anybody out there that's got enough brains to do anything on somebody as big and great as Bob Armstrong was. They did a 46-second little and interviewed a guy that nobody knew anything about. When Larry Brock was available, when a whole lot of people were available, just might as well not done anything. Channel 4, however, did a very good little story on it. The only thing that was kind of, and we in the business, we'll get a laugh out of this, the video they used, and they could use it because WTVY, Channel 4 Studio Wrestling, Southeastern days, but the video they used, guys, and you remember the angle when the Tennessee Stud was manager, the Stud stable? They show Ron coming out of the heel dressing room and nailing poor Bob with a cane in the middle of the ring instead of showing Bob wrestling and going over. They show him getting the heck beat out of him. Oh Lord! You cannot make this stuff up.
That producer didn't know which one was Ron Fuller and Bob Armstrong. That was the problem.
I guess that's...
They could hear the name Bob. They could hear the name Bob Armstrong.
The match, because the match probably had Bob Armstrong versus whoever he was wrestling. Oh, let's use that. Well, Ron beating the hell out of him with a cane.
Michael Calloway. Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
I'm sure Bob got a laugh in heaven on that one, saying, "Oh my gosh!"
Probably did.
Somebody tell them to finish. But they did a good job, a good story, and it's been an outpouring everywhere. I mean, all the things not only on Facebook, but as I said, on Fox News last night. I mean, my goodness! But he was loved like no other guy I've ever seen in the business. Go ahead with Michael Calloway from down here.
Yeah, Michael Calloway. I didn't get to see Bob. Let's see, I think something's wrong there, but he says that Bullet Bob had been coming to Dothan for 41 years. That is just incredible. and I enjoyed all 41 years of seeing him. Rest in peace, losing my father. There's so many prayers for Scott, Steve, and Brian. Michael Calloway, great wrestling fan from down in Dothan, Alabama. Teresa Lynn, he was my child. He was my childhood, no doubt. I look forward to the weekend to see him wrestle. I think a lot of people wanted to see him. Robin Kurtz, Brett West, as is Ron West's son. Yes, I am Ron West's son. Steve Dalton, hey, thank you so much for coming on. Will Wheeler said Bob will be missed. Great talent, great stories. Thomas Williams always loved when Bullet Bob and the boys came to Berry, Alabama. Dennis Cook said he always lived around the Memphis territory. I knew he lived somewhere where he saw Bob a lot. Randall Hyde loved watching CCW at the Boutwell in the 80s. Him and the Fullers, Adrian Street. It was always fun to watch him wrestle and see who was trying to unmask him next. and find out if he was really Bob Armstrong. Let's see. We're running out of time, so I'm going to Robin says she remembers some of those shirts in the back that we used to sell. Will said I briefly met him at the NWA Legends Convention in 2007. He was genuine and cool. No doubt anybody that met him will say the same thing. Jim Murphy, Bob always respected the fans, and they returned the respect with love. Tanja Matthews, Big Bo Drummo's daughter, Charlie, if you remember Big Bo Drummo.
I know exactly. I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she comes from good stock, is what I'll say.
Yep, she sure does.
Dadgum right.
Brian Bodie Green says, I have the program, and he teamed with Daryl Cochran as the Durangos, and I do have that, and I also have a thing that tells him wrestling as Jim Durango, and I think we'll be coming to that on the next when we do about Bob Armstrong. Michelle said, I know how it feels to lose both parents. My thoughts and prayers are with the Armstrong family. Bullet Bob was one of my favorite wrestlers. Rest in peace, Bullet Bob. Robert Eldridge Sandridge, Bob and Daryl was the only to stay with Lester Welch during the war with Ann Gunkel. Was right. Daryl there? Daryl there at the time? During that time?
I think so. But Bob was the only full-time guy that stayed. And you look at some of those cards during that era, they would bring in Florida, they'd bring in some Tennessee, they'd bring in some of the Carolinas. They had some awesome cards in Atlanta, but I often wondered how much did it mean, because they really couldn't do any angles, Rodney, with those guys. They were just bringing them in and putting them together. You know what I mean? But it still drew.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it was hard to do an angle because you were bringing in people from so many different territories. But Bob has told me he was the only full-time guy who stayed with the Atlanta office.
Ton just said the Armstrongs are amazing people. Lots of childhood memories. All right, Jack. Any last comments? Because we're going to have to. We're running out of time here. Any lasting comments? Any other comments you'd like to make about Bob Armstrong?
Just so grateful, to have known him and worked with him and learn from him more than anything else. To be able to learn under that tree of knowledge is, something that I'll never forget or take for granted. Thank you, Bob. Everything I do it for you in this business.
Rodney, any lasting comments? Any closing comments on Bullet Bob?
If you want to see how a man is regarded, see how his family regards him. No doubt about that. They loved him, and you can tell they were raised right, because just as we talked about Bob treating the fans right, so did Scott and Steve, Brad, and Brian. They always treated the fans great. So, fantastic.
Charlie, closing comments?
They say if a man at the end of his life has 5 friends, 5 true friends that would stick by him through thick and thin, and have 5 true friends at the end of his life, well, Joseph Melton James, Bob Armstrong, might have been one of the richest men in the history of the United States of America. He was loved by all, And everybody that talks to you in the business said, Bob was my best friend. He said he had all those best friends. To the family, we love you. We pray for you. We care about you. And there'll never, ever be another person with the personality, the charisma, and the love for what he did and his family than Joseph James.
Well, folks, for Charlie Platt, Rodney West, and Jack Lord, I'm Brent West, and thank you so much for being a part of this tribute to one great man, Bullet Bob Armstrong. See you later.